Hey folks, David Stewart here. So, I was reading a book recently, and within the flurry of the prose of this story, the author threw out this idea that when politicians want to help poor people, what they do is give them loans. That is, they put them in debt. And I think from the seed of that idea, if that's a tree, the branches are very, very far reaching. I think in the context of that idea, you can talk a lot about the mortgage meltdown of 2008 and onwards. But what it got me thinking about was student loan debt. And as a former college teacher and as someone who went to college, I have a perspective on it. But I wanted to give you like my whole three-dimensional perspective on how student loan debt works and why I think it's sort of here to stay in a way, and hopefully provide you a little bit of wisdom if you happen to be one of those people that is looking to go to college, give you a little bit of information to make a good decision and really think about what this student loan thing's about. So very frequent thing for people my age in their early 30s is to complain about the amount of student loan debt they have and like want to have some sort of political action to forgive that student loan debt. And I wanted to sort of get to the heart of that perspective and dismantle it and show how sometimes those people can slightly be victims, but how other ways you can still be responsible when thinking about thinking about student loan debt. So first of all, I don't think that people have called it the student loan crisis or something. I don't think that system is likely to change, and I'd like to present you with some reasons that I don't think it's going to change. First of all, a lot of people benefit from the student loan system as it is. Most of the people who benefit are actually not the students. The primary party that benefits from the student loan system is the universities themselves. So the universities, of course, if you are saying that you're going to give essentially an unlimited unsecured loan to anyone that wants to go to college, and they have to spend it at college at that institution, that essentially allows sort of a type of concentrated inflation, if you want to think like a concentrated inflation of the money supply on this like one service. And I know there's a technical economic term for this, but it's not coming to my head. But essentially you're concentrating all this money in this one area and letting them spend it on one particular item, but making the amount that they spend essentially unlimited. And what that allows is for universities to raise their tuition. So there's always this complaint that's like, man, tuition is so high, I have to go into so much debt to pay for the high tuition of college. And over the last 30 years, college tuition's increased enormously, and the quality of the education hasn't gone up. Where are they spending this money? And the reality is it's gone up because of the availability of student loans. When you make all of that gigantic amount of credit available, a lot of it is probably funneled through the Federal Reserve, which means you're sort of like making the money up as you're giving it to students. All of that massive amount of credit going to that one area is essentially making it so that the price can be unlimited, and colleges are going to raise the price sky high. Then you have to take out a bigger loan to pay for it, which lets them raise tuition even more because the market signal is the market's willing to pay anything for education. And eventually, I don't think it will slow down or stop until a large portion of young people start to opt out of college and pursue other options besides the university system because of the cost to benefit ratio as they understand it. But there's a lot of wisdom that has to be transmitted before that will happen. So that's going to continue to rise, and then it'll reach some peak at some point in the near future, and then eventually it'll just stay there. It's not really going to get that much cheaper until things really, really change and college starts to become much less relevant in the economy. That's already happening. College is becoming less relevant in the economy already. So the big one is, the universities definitely benefit from it. And if you think about where's that money going, it's like, well, they build stadiums, they build these student centers, and of course they spend it on themselves. The executives that run the executives that run like the UC system, their salaries are very, very high. They're in the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars. Janet Napolitano, former Obama administration Secretary of Homeland Security, she makes, I think, around $600,000 a year, maybe a little bit less, which is more than she made working for the federal government. So $600,000 a year to be the head of the UC system, and she's always consistently voted to raise the pay of her compatriots, of her fellows, the people she works with. And, who does she donate to? Well, she If we look at the list of Hillary Clinton's donors, the first one is a pro-abortion group, and the second one is individuals from the University of California. That's her second biggest donor over the course of her political lifetime. So what are they doing with all the money that they get from the student tuition? Well, they're paying it back to the politicians to make sure that both the UC and the CSU system here in California continue to be subsidized by taxpayers. That's increasing the amount of money they have available for that. And also to keep that student loan system in place so there's an unlimited amount of money that could be funneled to the colleges through a debt system. Who else benefits from the college debt system? Well, the financial institutions benefit in a gigantic way. Now, usually the rebuttal to my student loans are so hard. It's like, why are student loans have such high interest rates? It's like, well, they're an unsecured loan. They're a loan made without any kind of collateral. Normally, when you take out a loan, like on a house, I'm in a house. If you don't pay the mortgage on your house, the collateral for that loan is the house itself. That's how the bank repossesses the house. So the collateral for your loan is the thing you're taking the loan out on when you get a mortgage, or when you're making like a car loan or something like that. There's a physical object that has some market value that the lender can recover from you to pay for the cost of the debt. With student loans, that doesn't exist, right? So they have to be, there has to be a higher service on that debt. And that's the usual line of reasoning. However, part of that is that your student loans will never go away, ever. So if you're a young person, you need to know that your student loans will not be forgiven if you declare bankruptcy. They will not be reorganized. You will always have to pay your student loans no matter what. And again, it's part of that like no collateral thing. But the system's set up so that they can give a loan to somebody and be secured that that person will be paying that loan for the rest of their life, even if they never have the money for it. And the interest on that, it's going to be massive if you don't manage to pay off your student loan debt in a timely fashion. And I will say that this is bad on those people who give out student loans. You're giving the loans out, this loan that can't be gotten rid of by any bankruptcy or anything like that. It can only be paid down. You're giving these loans out to the people who are least capable of making a good judgment, that can legally sign a contract, and that's 18-year-olds. And if you're watching this and you're 16, 17, 18, I do not mean to insult you when I say that you are the least capable, but you have to think about, compare yourself now. You might be an extremely wise 18-year-old, but compare yourself now to how wise you will be when you're age 50. Because I can tell you right now, when I look back at myself as an 18-year-old and I think about who I was at the age of 18, I was a tremendous fool compared to how I am now. So even if you're really wise and you're really prudent at the age of 18, you're going to be so much wiser when you're 40 or 50 that it's not even going to be a comparison. So you have to look at it like that. And as wise as you are, there's lots of people who aren't as wise and aren't as good at making decisions. They don't have that input, or they don't have the prudence to really think about what they might be doing. So for those people, you have lots of banks. Citibank gives out student loans. In some cases, I think Citibank gives out student loans through another company that doesn't say Citibank, and I'm trying to remember what it's called, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. So a lot of times people don't realize they're taking out these loans from these big banks. The loans are subsidized often by the federal government, and people think that subsidy is encouraging debt, and it is. But most of the time, the subsidy is paying the interest on the debt while the person's at school. That's the subsidy. So from a financial institution's perspective, the subsidy is a win-win. Your federal government is going to pay you the interest on the loan that you're making to this 18-year-old kid who will sign on the dotted line and take out as much money as you want to give him and can't make a good decision about large sums of money. And it's not to insult 18-year-olds. It's just compare yourself to the older version. Most 18-year-olds are just not very good with money. They have no economic experience. They have no idea of cost to benefit when they're 18 and they're majoring in something, and they don't know how valuable that major is and whether that money's going to be worth it. 18-year-olds are really not good decision makers, which is why when you were 18, if you're older and watching this, you probably made a lot of bad decisions. Just like when I was 18, I made bad decisions too. That's part of being young, and that's part of gaining wisdom too, is making those bad decisions. But we allow really, really huge protected banking corporations to come in and give these loans to kids that they can never pay back, or will be paid back over such a long period of time that it's going to be a burden to them. And they know this, and they do it because there's absolutely no risk to them making the loan. There's no risk because that person will never get rid of it with bankruptcy. And for loans that aren't subsidized by the federal government, that interest will accrue until you start paying the loan and graduate college. So it's a win-win for them too, is that they can put the interest on afterwards, or they could put on the interest, or the federal government could pay the interest. Either way, it's fine. And the other thing about the subsidy, people think they're like really getting a deal with the federal government paying like 4 years of interest. But if it takes you 20 years to pay down your student loan debt, the 4 years of interest, the initial 4 years of interest is not that much. And you're not paying down the principal. And if you really want to lower the amount of service cost of debt, the interest that you're paying on debt, you need to be paying down the principal. But a lot of companies that put out loans, they're aware of this, and they'll organize your payments so you're not paying down that much principal, so they can really get a lot of good interest out of you. Anyway, so the financial institutions benefit tremendously. Do the students benefit? Well, some do. And those students that benefit are the ones that meet a very certain criteria. They don't have the financial means to go to college, but they are majoring in a highly profitable major. They're getting a certification in something that's extremely profitable that will pay back their student loan, and the student loan is the only way that they're going to acquire that knowledge. So if you have to take out a student loan to go to MIT and major in computer engineering, that might be worth it to you. If you have to take out a student loan to go to UC Berkeley and major in women's studies, that is going to be flushing money down the toilet. We all know that. There's people who will go on and say, my women's studies degree is just as valid as your engineering degree. And it's like, maybe from some like platonic psychic perspective, that's true, but the market doesn't care about that. And the market says that certification is meaningless. So for some students, yes, it's a benefit, but for the vast majority, it's not really a benefit. And by making all of that credit available, it also makes them waste 4 years of their life studying something that there's not going to make them any money. So there's also the opportunity cost, that they're not pursuing an actual profitable, meaningful, good enterprise, and instead they're doing women's studies, or they're doing something else, or doing music, which I have a degree in, and I've done videos on why it's not usually a good idea to major in one of the arts. So the thing is, why is this not going to change? And I mentioned that basically there's a lot of donation that goes to Hillary Clinton from the UC system. Well, if you happen to look at her other donors, they're all financial institutions. So in order for this system to change, you'd have to have an incentive for politicians to want to legislate it meaningfully change it. And they're not going to do that, because the best way to change this would be to actually say, hey, student loans can now be gotten rid of or reduced significantly through bankruptcy. Well, what does that do? That hoses the financial institutions, right? They're the ones who are going to have to eat a big loss, because people are going to be declaring bankruptcy to get out of their student loans. Well, what will that do to them? Well, first of all, they'll take the loss, but who cares? They took a bunch of bailouts from the federal government anyway. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't really care about financial institutions taking a loss on a loan that basically is preying upon the poor judgment of young people. So they get hosed for it, but that sends a signal to them that they shouldn't be giving out student loans unless they're going to give them to people that they're very confident are not going to declare bankruptcy and get out of their student loans. And that'll change all the market signals. And if you have less people enrolling in college, or you have more competition with those students, the cost of tuition starts to come down, and then it becomes more affordable for people eventually to major in things like women's studies without like destroying their financial future. Because if you go back 30 or 40 years to when tuition was affordable, yeah, you could major in something that was odd, like Chicano studies, that wasn't thought of as like this highly technical degree, but you weren't investing a huge amount of money in that, so you weren't like crippling your future by doing Chicano studies or something like that. You were just majoring in something that you were very interested in, and you were probably paying your tuition directly because it was affordable. Now that's not the case. Now you have to really think about what you're getting out of your education if you're going to be taking out any kind of student loans. And my general recommendation is for your lifetime, go to the college that gives you the education you want for basically the best cost to benefit ratio, which is probably going to be the lowest tuition that you can afford. Work and avoid student loans at all costs if you can. So if you have to go to the state university instead of Stanford, after a while you might be glad that you're not having to pay $500 a month plus out of every single paycheck in order to pay for the privilege of going to Stanford. Okay, so you need to be good about making those sorts of judgments. Now, just to sort of give the other side of that as well. There's a lot of people, like I said, there's a lot of people my age that complain about student loan debt. The truth is, like I said, that system's not going away, so complaining is not going to do anything. And the other thing is, even if you were young and stupid, that's not an excuse. You still made the bad decision and you have to own up to it. If you chose to take out a bunch of student loans to get a music degree, that is your own fault. And you need to look at it like any other bad life decision, right? Somebody gets pregnant when they're 20 and now they're a single mother having to raise a kid, or they have to give a kid up for adoption, and that's really hard, right? Well, that's the result of a bad decision, and we may feel sorry for you in a certain sense. Like, we may feel some sympathy that, like, man, that really sucks to have to give that kid up for adoption. But we're not going to say, like, well, clearly we need a law that's going to pay you some recompense for having to give your kid up for adoption. No. Or the same thing, like, if you're like, well, when I was younger, I got in trouble with some drugs and I had to go to rehab, right? So that's a result of some bad decisions, and we feel sorry for you, but at the same time, you don't get like some special love years later because you happen to make a bad decision when you're 18. Lots of people make bad decisions when they're 18, and in some cases, you have to spend the rest of your life dealing with those bad decisions. And by the way, if you're young, my best advice is, those things that are going to really cripple your life, and you really need to avoid those things. Okay, you don't have to have me tell you that you should, avoid things like hard drugs, and you should, avoid things like unprotected sex, right? So be responsible, and be responsible with your money too. Really think about the cost benefit analysis. So for those people that are my age and really complain a lot and want the government to just like pay off their student loan debt, which that might happen. That's going to be more likely than actually changing the system in a way that would actually benefit students. Because if the federal government paid off the student loans, the financial institutions which have purchased many of the politicians through donations, they of course still get paid. As long as the banks are still getting paid, then it's a win-win for them. So the federal government pays it off or the student pays it off. Who cares? We get the money anyway, right? Just looking at the list of Hillary Clinton's donators, and I'll give the link for this. The first one is Emily's List. That's a pro-abortion group. They've donated over $1 million to her over the years. Individuals from the University of California, Citigroup, J.P. Morgan Chase, DLA Piper. I actually don't know what that is. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Time Warner, a media company. So as you look down the list, Harvard University's one, Microsoft Corp, the U.S. government itself, Bank of America. There's a huge number. The main ones are like educational institutions, financial institutions, and of course Emily's List, which is a pro-abortion group. So think about who's actually paying for those politicians to run their re-election campaigns, and you'll find in a vast majority of them on both sides of the aisle that there's banks behind it. So are politicians going to be incredibly inclined to make a meaningful change that would hose the banks? And the answer to me is no. So that means this is going to stick around for a while, whether they create some kind of student loan repayment system or whatever. It's not going to fix the real problem, which is that there's this concentrated amount of extreme currency inflation in one service, which is higher education. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. My book is linked down below if you want to support the channel. Buying that book helps me out a lot. And if you read it and you liked it, or you didn't like it, please leave a review. That helps me out a lot if there's a lot of reviews. And I really, really do appreciate it. I will be running like a free book campaign for that in the future, so I'll make a specific video announcement for that. But otherwise, thank you so much. Please leave me your thoughts on the student loan debt crisis in what you really think about student loans. And if you're young, please act prudently. Please listen to your parents and your elders, and especially anyone who has a good idea about how finance works, to decide, what kind of how you should finance your higher education, or what you should pursue for higher education. I'm not one of those that thinks everyone needs to go to college, and I'm definitely one of those people that prefers practical experience to academic experience, just when I'm dealing with people out in the world. I love hearing how people have gained wisdom and experience, because those things are really, really valuable. So give me your wisdom down below. I really appreciate it, and I sincerely hope that you guys have a great, great day.